It must say my show.
Almost $300 million.
So the show has come to stay. Mummy na yesu. Na yen chichire o man. Na wonsom oni nipa.
E daddy e Ghana for dia. Enye BP dia. Enye NDC dia. Enye obi bia dia.
President Kufa. Because what to near man and affecting all this. Full prices now what they buy.
Yeah, I just NDC for car be kwa for Ghana card akwaje ndani bi kama nasa.
Mene wo ka say ya kan. Ye no nya se ya te de so e kina titi pa se kina. NDC for wo be kwa for daddy bill. Wo be kan. Me na make a draw.
Mo pese mo hwe susu a mo ko Facebook na Instagram, na YouTube, na Twitch, TodayGhanaNews TV, Anchor FM.
Yechia Ghana Food. My show is your show because a Ghana 80 and a show that will be my show. And that will be asset.
Our strength in unity from vision to victory. The NDC shall lead. Stable Democrat, Ghana, our strength in unity. Eja bana It's our land. Victory! It's our land. JJ is a winner. Arise, for Ghana, of the truck of the land.
I always say this. Samutu Abama Nana Edo. Esambe ye president Biomwa and the Ghana Mwajimi. Excuse my language. I am MPP. I'm not talking for NDC here. I'm speaking as a social commentator and as an imam from MPP communication. And I mean Kasai. You see, I've been an MPP Nasara chairman for 9 years in the most biggest Zongo community, which is Nima Mamobi. And I know what I'm saying. Someone to me can't make a tiremo. I dream Papa Biani Nanado Tiremo. I'm telling you, I dream Papa Biani Tiremo or train Namu Mano another 4 years. So almost say 4 more for Nana to do more. To do more wahala, you will see that kind of person we are talking about. Because you have followed the train. I was campaigning for Nanado in 2008. I was campaigning for Nanado in 2008. You see, alongside with Paula Foko and your friend say the former chief of staff, Elvis Kikaho. Kona eni omutina sisisia netie nsem send ya wa yomuama. So such person, some of us will come out and say it. We can't keep quiet. because you were busiafo. Almost still more MPP. I did not say I'm not preaching against MPP as a party, because definitely nebeye biano your party colors were. We are MPP, all right. I'm not preaching against MPP, but the administration no are MPP delegates are calling abano. You see, administration, and Nanado administration and Bawemiano. You see. Nimpa bi wo ho a omoye nimpa a omowo nyansa ene ntiase within MPP a omoyiso ye nimpa papa bia ni wo MPP mu a ende Nanado opese oni omunya. What is this enkita ho so we nimpa papa. I'm telling you, Nanado will remove you from it. So we nimpa papa o see we dey meye papa. I'm a party in the dache. He will remove you out. And you will not mukasa. Or penny pebi. He said Captain Kodanum. You see? Or penny pebia. You know, omo essayadie. Otherwise, as a government, say Oba, you come with manifesto. Who the manifesto neighbor? I'm a party no, because o party the Dutch in Tino. O party no name say this is our manifesto. Say yen year that be your party no a better than I so. Say yen year so a cut your party no forever. You see, a dear one manifesto no yejuma, including free SHS and yejuma. You can't cover people with free SHS. And Juma. People say free SSSO, free SSSO. I'm telling you, it wasn't successful a bit. Free HSS wasn't as successful. I'm telling you, free SSS. Say what you say? Unkola omwa kochrono, omwa pasia, and the ayapo. There is no quality education in free SSS. I'm not speaking as NDC. I'm not speaking for NDC. I'm speaking as a social commentator and an imam, opinion leader, a concerned citizen, and a member of MPP. And Amika say, you see, be ni free HSS moi, a ye papa mayankola. I'm telling you, sir, free HSS way. So person ubanya. Na se onni sika wo de be wo ba no be ko private a mesrewa ma onso adwuma bi nkola no nyina bon one demonstration.
Wonderful, and good evening to our cherished viewers wherever you are. Once again, you are most welcome to my show, coming to you live on Today Ghana News TV channel. And it is a show that is dedicated to political parties to come your way every week to tell you what we have under our sleeves and what we wish to do if the opportunity is given to us once again, and what we believe that we need to have a review to ensure that things are done properly for us and in going forward for the development of Mother Ghana. Today is the turn of the National Democratic Congress, and my name is Jerome, your host, as usual, and I am very privileged to present to you today the issues of electoral reforms proposed by the National Democratic Congress. And in this evening's broadcast, we are much privileged again to have no other person but the Director of Elections of the National Democratic Congress, Honorable Elvis Afriyie Ankara. Honorable Elvis is a household name in the body politic of our country. He has led in several departments of the National Democratic Congress. He's been a Minister of State before, a presidential staffer, and currently he is leading the reforms as a Director of Elections of our great party. Honorable Afriyie Ankara, you are most welcome to Today Ghana's News channel.
reforms as a director of elections of our group.
I believe we have a bit of a technical challenge. I hope the producer can resolve that as soon as possible, and then we'll kickstart the show. So, Honorable Afriyie, you are most welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, and good evening, Jerome. It's been a while.
Yes,
since the last time I came to Germany, I haven't seen your face.
That is true, sir. That is very true. I hope you are doing very well.
Very well, by the grace of God, and
great.
I'm grateful for the opportunity.
And once again, to all our viewers, we have our Director of Elections this evening to throw more light on the electoral reforms that have been proposed by our great party that we order the Electoral Commission would consider. And there are some other issues that, well, they are in different categories, but he will give us more insight. So, Honorable, I think just to start with, there was a short clip that was played before where somebody was saying that the President, Akufo-Addo, would be a failure if the people of Ghana decides to vote for him the second time. I believe that the person who just finished speaking could be described as a prophet of our time. Yes, he's been vindicated in all aspects of his presentation. I don't know, you are right down on the floor. Will you add anything to it?
Well, we just came back from Kumasi yesterday. President John Mahama and the running mates and the rest of us went on a thank you tour of the Ashanti region. And believe me, what we saw and experienced in Ashanti region was amazing. It was as if we were in the Volta region or some other stronghold of the NDC. And by and large, what we are observing is that everybody is denying that they voted for the MPP. Everybody is denying, because people who are suspected or seen to be supporters of MPP, sympathizers of MPP, or people who voted for the MPP are being castigated because of the suffering, the incompetence, the corruption, and the misgovernance. So what you see is that many people, everybody say, oh, we didn't vote for them. We didn't vote for them. Or those who are courageous enough are saying, well, we have regretted. We have regretted. So we say, well, you voted for 4 more. 4 more, we've only done, what, 8 or 9 months, and you are complaining. We have 3 and 4 or 5 months more to go. And unfortunately, nobody is going to get visa to go anywhere. So we're all inside. We all suffer. So as for the failures of Nana-Addo, it's just amazing. The level of incompetence, it's a lousy government, you know, in every facet. You take the economy, education, infrastructure, health, just name it. There's not one single sector that you can point to that you say that the government is performing and deserves any credit. A country where when we collect our taxes, the over 80% of that amount goes into paying debts and salaries of workers. In fact, sometimes government has to borrow to be able to pay salaries and pay interest on loans, not even on the principal. It's a mess. And we just hope that, you know, nothing untoward will happen in this country before 2024, so we can kick them out.
Definitely. I believe strongly that many more people are looking forward to 2024 and wishing that it would have just been tomorrow.
Absolutely.
And for our cherished viewers, you can follow us on Facebook, on Instagram, and we are live on YouTube, and then again on Anchor FM on Today Ghana News TV channel. Honorable, now let's go down a little bit to the proposals that has been put across by the NDC. I don't know the motivation for those proposals, but could it be the outcome of the 2020 election?
Okay, so I think it's important to put the entire discussion in the proper context. Way back in 1992, when we held the first elections, after the presidential elections, the MPP lost. And so they decided to boycott the parliamentary elections. Yeah. So they did not have representation in parliament. And they raised a lot of concerns about the electoral process. The Electoral Commission then, led by Dr. Afriyie, felt that in a multi-party democracy, you needed the voice and views of the opposition party in order to form or make policies, especially those that have to do with electoral issues. We needed their input and that of other stakeholders. And so, since the opposition were not even in parliament, a platform needed to be created for them so they could articulate their views. And that was how IPAC was formed in the Inter-Party Advisory Committee. You know that the Constitution and the Act that sets up the EC states clearly that the EC is not subject to the direction of anybody. But you know that in good governance, in administrative processes and procedures, if you are undertaking any policy or you are embarking on any policy and program, stakeholder input, stakeholder consultation, and their buy-in is very critical. And so the Electoral Commission in its wisdom decided that, look, let's get the inputs and buy-in of the MPP, of civil society, and all the other stakeholders in the electoral process. So that's how the Inter-Party Advisory Committee, IPAC, was formed in 1993. Now, when IPAC was formed, IPAC proposed a number of major reforms to our electoral architecture. If you recall, in 1992, we were using opaque ballot boxes. These were changed to transparent ballot boxes. In 1992, we were using tampering ID cards. These were changed to photo ID cards. In 1992, the votes were taken to a collation center before they were counted. IPAC introduced a system where the votes are counted and declared and displayed at the polling station. The biometric registers that we're using now, it was IPAC that introduced them. And in fact, there were two committees at IPAC, the technical committee and the legal committee. On the technical committee, we had Dr. Kweno, who brought internet to Ghana. And then the legal committee, we had, and then MPP had Peter McMenu representing them. And then on the legal committee, we had Alhaji Hudu Yahya representing the NDC, and then Obi Amwa representing the MPP. And all the other smaller parties also had one representative. Then we had representatives from civil society. So whenever there was going to be any major proposal, such as procurement of biometric equipment, this committee would look at all the various bids from various entities, examine them technically, evaluate them, and then do an assessment that these equipment, they should tune it this way. This is what we want because it's going to be used by the political parties. Then the legal committee, they would also look at the SIA, the constitutional instrument that governs every election, and make inputs and do the draft before it is presented to IPAC and the EC before it goes to Parliament. So there's always been that interface and involvement and engagement and inputs from the various political parties. Now, come after the MPP won the elections, you know, they kicked out Madame Charlotte Osei, and then they brought in Madame J. Mensah. When Madame J. Mensah came, her attitude and her posture, and she had articulated this several times, so that she was not going to be bound by any inputs from anybody, and that they would do whatever they wanted to do. To the extent that even Bosman Asari said that the NDC is an existential threat to Ghana's democracy. And so with that posturing, instead of the IPAC becoming a consultative body where inputs from the political parties would be generated, it became an informative body where you go to IPAC and the EC just tells you what it has decided to do, and it will not listen to any inputs at all whatsoever from you. And I can cite several examples. So that was the context within which we went into the elections. So I've given you the background, I've given you the immediate context. Then we went into the elections. When we went into the elections, many things happened. What we all saw was the declaration of results, which as we speak today, the EC has not been able to tell us which of the results are accurate. They declared wrong results the first time. They went to change those results. There was a mistake in the change results, and then they did it about 6 times. And then you also had a situation where the forms 8A, B, and C, which we all call the pink sheets, the draft was sent to Parliament, and Parliament approved. After the special voting, we realized that that what was used for the special voting, there was a portion where we do ballot accounting. That portion is a portion where you're able to determine the number of people who voted with the biometric device, those who voted manually, so that you can check whether the number of ballot papers that came to a polling station, the people who have voted plus the remainder, they tally. That's how you can do ballot accounting to ensure that nobody puts in extra excess ballots that are from not part of what is at the polling station. That portion had been removed. And after the special voting, she was directed. There was an emergency meeting. National Security was there. Chief of Staff was there. They asked her to go and do the pink sheets or the forms 8A, B, and C in a manner that was prescribed by Parliament, by law, because it's a major legal issue. She went a day before the elections. We went for an emergency meeting. Lo and behold, she refused to follow that direction and rather introduced a stamp. After the election, in the course of the election, what we observed was that when we did the pink sheet audit, over 1 million of the pink sheets that either did not have the stamp, or there was a stamp but it was not filled, or there was a stamp that was filled but there was no signature. Now, that alone constitutes a serious infraction of the entire electoral process. Because how then would you know that at every polling station, say if 500 ballot papers were brought to your polling station and 300 people voted through the biometric register, and then 50 people voted through the manual, it means that you have 150 left. So you should be able to do the accounting. Now, if that is not filled, and at the end of the day, if they give you 500 ballot papers, and yet 600 people, the total number of people who voted plus the remainder is 600, it means there's a problem. So that's a major infraction. And then many other things that went on during the election. And usually after every election, the EC itself would ask the political parties to bring reform proposals. After the 2013 Supreme Court ruling, the Supreme Court itself directed that there should be some reforms in our electoral architecture. And the EC at that time set up a committee to look at electoral reforms. That committee had members of the NDC, MPP, the smaller parties had 2 representatives. They had people from civil society, and then the EC itself. I think it was about a 9-member committee or so. And they proposed 15 reforms. That report was presented in 2015. When the report was presented, at that time, Dr. Afriyie was just leaving office, so he couldn't implement them. Then Madame Charlotte also came, and she was also confronted with an election, so she couldn't implement the reforms. So Madame J. Mensah inherited those reforms. Throughout her tenure, she didn't make any effort to implement those reforms. Then we went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, we went there saying that the declaration of the results was unconstitutional, because declaration of results is a legal issue. If you declare results, just the same way we declare results at the parliamentary, the results must be based on specific figures. So if you declare a result and the result is wrong, that whole declaration becomes unconstitutional. Now, it's even worse by the fact that you go and do correction, and the correction is also wrong. And then you change it again, then it's also wrong. So we said, look, it is unconstitutional. Now, we want you to come and tell us what was the basis for which you declared the results. Where is your data? Where did you get your data? Number 2, we want to examine the documents that form the basis of those declarations. And then we have questions to ask you. I was in court throughout the process. When we filed for these, we call them discovery, examination of documents, etc., interrogatories and inspection of documents. The judges consistently, over a 2-day period, where the lawyers were arguing back and forth, told us that, oh, you wait. When Madame J. Mensah comes to stand in the dock for doing cross-examination, you can ask her all these questions, and then she will respond. We said, okay. And they said it consistently, all of them. Lo and behold, the time came for us to cross-examine Madame J. Mensah. And the same judges tell us, oh, you cannot cross-examine her because they use civil procedure rules to say that she cannot incriminate herself, therefore she cannot come to the witness stand. And we felt that was a serious miscarriage of justice, because Madame J. Mensah is not a public servant or the EC chairperson. Let me say it, we'll talk about the EC chairperson. Is not a private citizen. She's a public servant who is performing a very important and critical constitutional duty. Therefore, she's duty bound to give account of her activities. So if the highest court of the land cannot get her to mount a witness stand to give account on such a serious matter as declaration of results, then we are in trouble. Then going forward, it means that any other citizen of this country performing a public duty, when you ask the person to come and testify, I will say, well, and indeed, this has become a precedent. Today, if you have any civil case in courts, people will go and say they won't testify because that has become a precedent. So the Supreme Court denied us the opportunity to examine her and ask her to show proof with documentary evidence, the basis for the declarations, because we knew that there were a lot of errors and mistakes and manipulation of the results. The Supreme Court, unlike 2013, also did not give any directives on electoral reforms. So we came out of the courts and we looked at the entire electoral architecture. Meanwhile, immediately after that, the EC itself did a retreat and said that they were bringing 4 reforms. And of course, we boycotted that retreat because we felt that the EC itself was not credible. You cannot write an exam, mark your own, set your own exam, have your own marking script, and then you mark the script and say you have scored A+. It doesn't work that way. In every election, after every election, it is the political parties that then engage with civil society and everybody else, all the stakeholders, and then we present reform proposals to the EC, or in the case of 2013, the court would direct. And in any case, there are outstanding 15 reforms. What have you done about it? So this is the background and the context to we asking for going to now do our reform. Because we felt that, look, we've been having elections, every time there are issues, there are issues. What is the problem with our electoral architecture? What can we do to sanitize the system such that after an election, both losers and winners will be comfortable that indeed the system, the structures, the processes, the institutions have been very fair to everybody. So that was our approach. So even though it was an initiative of the NDC, our approach was very nationalistic. And it even reflected in the kind of approach that we use. So we went for Professor Kwame Ahoy and then Nana Todazi, who are experts in governance and transitions respectively, to lead the process. And then we did a lot of engagement. They engaged with former EC chairpersons. They got a lot of literature from the EC, from international magazines and journals. They consulted widely, academia, civil society, and then we also presented our own proposals to them. So it was, and then they also looked at the 15 outstanding proposals from 2015. So that then formed the basis for the 34 comprehensive reform proposals that we put across. So
yeah, Honor, before we get into the proposals itself, there was a bit of a controversy in the media space as to where your proposal was supposed to be accepted. At one point, we knew that it was sent to the Electoral Commission. Then we heard the Electoral Commissioner saying that you should send it to IPAC, and this debate was going on. So where is it as at now?
You see, sometimes it is the Electoral Commission themselves that create credibility problems for themselves.
Yeah.
So we wrote to the Electoral Commission, attached a copy of our proposals, And I just hope I can find it. When we wrote to the Electoral Commission, the Electoral Commission wrote back to us. They wrote and said they have received our proposals and they are studying them in writing.
Okay.
We also wrote to several CSOs and entities, including the New Patriotic Party, the NPP. The Electoral Commission, as I said, responded to our proposals. Then, about a week or 2 weeks afterwards, the NPP wrote back to us. When the NPP wrote to us, they said that we should take our proposals to IPAC. Of course, we said, where is IPAC? Who is IPAC? There is no secretariat called IPAC. IPAC is hosted by the Electoral Commission. So there is no entity. If you write a letter and address it to IPAC, it will go nowhere. So that is why we sent it to the Electoral Commission, because the Electoral Commission is the host and the mother and father of IPAC. So that's why we wrote to IPAC, Electoral Commission, which they have responded to. Lo and behold, after the EC had written to us acknowledging receipt and telling us that our proposals have been studied, then the MPP now writes and says, go to IPAC. A day after, then the EC chairperson now says, oh, take your proposal to IPAC, without letting the public know that they had already received our proposals and responded to it. My brother, how do you describe this conduct? Is it not duplicitous conduct?
Seriously.
Is it not lending itself? Is that not evidence to see that the EC is not independent as it claims?
Not independent.
And
yes.
That they are remote controlled, because she was just regurgitating what the MPP General Secretary had said. Meanwhile, a sincere person will say, look, we have received a letter from the NDC. We have acknowledged receipt. At the appropriate time, we will call an IPAC meeting. That's fair, sincere. But you see, the duplicity is in the fact that after writing to us, and when the matter came up, she will not acknowledge that, oh, we have written to them, we have responded. No, but he just regurgitates what the MPP said, just for mere propaganda purposes. So this is what has happened. So it is in the bosom of the EC. They are the ones who will be implementing the reforms. It's a problem. We have gone, and let me tell you what we've done. We have done extensive work. We have met with the TUC, we have met with other labor unions outside the TUC, we have met with the Christian Council, we have met with the Muslim Council, we have met with the diplomatic community. In fact, we have another meeting with another group of diplomats next week. We've done thorough and extensive. We met with the CSOs, all the major CSOs that have to do with government. We had extensive discussions and deliberations with them. And I can say that over 90% of them, if not more, support and endorse our proposals. And indeed, we have a strategy, and they themselves are proposing that they will be doing a conference pretty soon to look at these reforms so that it becomes a national document. And we're not saying that we've made these proposals, therefore it should be accepted 100%. There are some that we know that, look, this one, there's consensus. There are some that may be twisted, adjusted, etc. That is the way to go. And so we believe that we are on track.
Definitely. Before we now go into the proposals and look at them by their various merit, there was something that I tripped on in preparing for this program. You would see that the Constitutional Review Committee's report in 2011, fortunately, I don't know, fortunately, the Electoral Commissioner currently, Madam Jane Mensah, was part of that committee. Exactly. And there was a recommendation, which I think the NDC has in your recommendation as well, about the approval of the Electoral Commission and the officers by Parliament.
Exactly.
It's interesting, Honorable. Can you throw more light on that part?
In fact, that is our first proposal, proposal number 1. And we said provide for prior parliamentary approval for the appointment of EC members But then when it comes to the chairperson, we said that approval should be by 2/3 of the members of parliament. And then the background is that the EC chairperson or members of the EC, there are some critical requirements which include independence, transparency, neutrality, credibility, and competence. Now, the current mode of appointment makes the EC appointments to appear to be partisan. So Afriyie suffered that at the initial stages, where because he was appointed by the NDC, so NDC, but because of his conduct and his experience and his wisdom and his approach, he was able to build confidence. Now, Charlotte Osei suffered same and had to be removed by the MPP. Now, Jim Mensah is suffering same. Okay, so if you are not careful, then it will mean that every government that comes will have to appoint an EC, and it's not good for our democracy. So you want a system where the representatives of the people will have an input into that appointment. And the justification is that if you look at the Supreme Court justices, whose role, they're also supposed to be independent and all that, it goes through parliamentary approval.
Goes through parliamentary, yeah.
Exactly. So the chairperson of the EC is also in a similar category. And as you rightly said, the Constitutional Review Commission, which the Madame Jim Mensah was part of, actually approved this proposal that the EC chairperson should be appointed and go through parliamentary approval. Now, we are saying that with the 2/3, what the 2/3 does automatically is that it even influences the choice. And I gave an analogy at one program that, look, if there's a short list of potential EC chairpersons, you have my name there. You have Johnson Asedun Ketia's name. You have Kennedy Japan. You have, let's say, Chairman Sambosu. And then you have Nana Tudazi. You have Dr. Akwete of IDEC. Okay? Immediately, you want to do a short list. My name will go off. Okay? Because I'm seen to be too partisan. Honorable Asedun Ketia's name will go off. Kennedy Japan's name will go off. Chairman Sambosu's name will go off. There will be 2 names left. That is Nana Tudazi and Dr. Akwete of IDEC. Now, by virtue of the fact that you know that you need to get 2/3 of members of parliament, so you know that if you present any of these names, the likelihood that they might go through is very high than if you put my name there. You see? So that in itself has an inbuilt mechanism of influencing the choice. Number 2, once the person knows that 2/3 of the members of parliament have approved him, he has that confidence knowing that he is now a representative of the state and not of a particular government. So that is the rationale.
Because he's going to get a vote from both sides.
Exactly. So that is the rationale. I don't know if you want me to continue or if you want to lead with questions.
Continue.
Then there's also a provision in PNDC Law 284, which states that when it comes to electoral offenses, so-called, it requires the written consent and approval of the Attorney General before electoral offenses could be prosecuted. So on a normal day, God forbid, if I see you in a crime and I slap you, it's assault, and I'll be arrested by the police and prosecuted. But if there's an election going on and I slap you, it becomes an electoral offense. And before the police can prosecute, the AG must give written consent. We thought this is completely wrong. That is why we've had several abuses, human rights abuses during elections. Remember the Ayawaso West Wogon case? Remember Hawa Kumson? She herself admitted that she fired a gun at the police. The police are unable to prosecute her because her colleague cabinet minister who sits with her in cabinet is the one who must give written consent to the police before she can be prosecuted. And we thought that that also creates a culture of impunity. Then, of course, we talked about specially designated courts for electoral offences, and then removal of names from the register. But one of the key proposals is that IPAC should be backed by legislation through an amendment to the Electoral Commission Act 1993 Act 451, which should spell out its composition and functions. And the background is that IPAC has served Ghana's electoral system very well. But with the advent of the Mensa administration, she virtually ignores IPAC. So IPAC is losing its relevance. That is one of the reasons why, the major reason why we boycotted IPAC, because it was becoming completely useless. You go there, your inputs are not taken on board. They will do whatever they want to do. And we want this to change. If IPAC is going to remain relevant, then we must have rules and regulations. Who are members of IPAC clearly written? What are the areas that IPAC can make inputs? And what are areas that IPAC cannot make inputs? What are the processes and procedures and regulations? Because again, what we noticed was that over the last 2 years of before the 2020 elections, especially in the last year, about 11 political parties were registered. Now, most of these parties were coming to IPAC. Now, in the past, as I've said, when we go to IPAC, decisions are taken by consensus and by dialogue and agreement. We agree, we don't agree, then we all come to a consensus. If we agree, we push it. If we don't agree, it's put on hold. So we hold back channel discussions to all arrive at a common ground. Now, with these new political parties, we go to IPAC, an issue is on the table. Mostly the EC will propose the issue. And then they say, oh, let's vote. And then when we vote,
oh, I believe we have a technical challenge, and we'll let a producer try to resolve it, and the Honorable will be back. Okay, Honorable, welcome back. Yes, please.
Okay. And so, obviously, when you vote, you will see that all these other parties who had been given their interim certificates by the Mensa Electoral Commission will not take a position against the same Mensa. So it was becoming a farce. And we've had situations where some of these parties, even when they come to the IPAC meetings, they fight among themselves. A representative will come and say, I'm the general secretary of this party. This one will say, I'm the chairman. When it comes to time, you see that there's another group that will say, I'm the general secretary, I'm the chairman. We've seen that many times. Yeah. So the whole IPAC was becoming a farce. So we said, no, we can't continue like this. This is not the spirit with which IPAC was started. IPAC has had tremendous positive impact on the electoral process, and therefore we need to streamline it and back it with legislation so that everybody will be clear in his mind. Now, people will say, oh, well, if they are independent, the judiciary is independent. It's a constitutional body, but it's a judicial council. In fact, the EC itself, by its own conduct, recognizes that in spite of its independence, it needs external input. So whilst they were messing up with IPAC, they themselves formed an eminent persons group.
Yeah.
What was the eminent persons group going to do? Was it not to advise them? So we just feel that things should be spelled out clearly. Everything should be clear so that everybody will know.
Honorable, there is this school of thought that says that if IPAC is given that legal backing, and it happens that there is an issue at stake, and IPAC takes an entrenched position against the Electoral Commission, then it becomes another difficulty for our electoral process. How do you see that?
That is why we're saying that we'll look at the electoral laws, look at the electoral architecture, define the modalities, membership, participation, etc., and then define the areas and things where IPAC will have a role. There will be areas that IPAC may not have any role.
Okay.
I hope you understand me. But there should be, it should be clear. We must have clarity. Otherwise, then there's no point.
Yeah.
Really. If we will go to meetings and the EC will come and inform us about the things that they will have to do, they want to do, and our inputs will not matter, then let's stop deceiving ourselves that we have a certain IPAC that feeds the advice. It is not realistic. Then we know. But if we are going to have IPAC that will make meaningful inputs, and I've given you the history and the trajectory of events, then of course we should be able to spell out the areas. Of course, there may be some areas I will say, no, this is sacrosanct. We will not go there. We leave that for the EC. But there are some areas that it must be very, very clear. We must spell out the procedures and the process. And then, of course, one thing that we've seen in this particular election is unprecedented in the history of this country. That 8 people were murdered in cold blood. During the registration, a young man called Silas was stabbed to death. Up to now, nothing has happened to any of the perpetrators. How come so? Firing guns all over the place. People were beaten, blood oozing out of people all over the place. These are serious human rights abuses bordering on criminality. Now, if you recall, during the Ayawaso West Wagon Commission, when the EC chairperson went to sit before the commission, she said she didn't see any violence. There was no violence. Meanwhile, we all saw what happened. He said, well, we are responsible for the election, not for security. We think that we must spell out by law the security responsibilities of the EC, if any, the police, and the military during registration of voters and during and after voting. It must be clear. It must be very, very clear, so that we know. For example, in our Ayawaso West Wagon, people came there armed, shot people, beat up people, maimed people. The district police commander, regional police commander, Minister of Interior said they didn't know anything about it. How can you imagine Germany, that such serious incidents occur, and then the district commander, regional commander, and the Minister of Interior, he would have resigned that very afternoon.
They would have resigned before they are even questioned.
But here we are. The person has been reappointed as Interior Minister. And nothing, absolutely nothing. The committee gave recommendations. Nothing has happened. Is it not preposterous? We met one of a group of the ambassadors. And in fact, it was the EU when they brought their interim reports. They were critical, but they said generally that the election was peaceful. And I asked them, 8 people dead, and you say the election is peaceful? In your country, when elections are held, how many people die? How can you 8 people have been murdered, and you look us in the face and you say it's a peaceful election, or our lives do not matter? In fact, they were very embarrassed, because you don't want to create a culture where killing of people during elections becomes normal. It's a subculture. So if 8 people died in this election, the next election, how many people are going to die? And because the perpetrators have not been identified and dealt with, so you create a culture of impunity. And so the next time they will be emboldened to do more. So we said we need a law that clearly states out security responsibilities. Do we even need soldiers in an election theater at all? In any case, even if policemen and soldiers come, do we need live bullets?
No.
We need to have all those things spelled out clearly, so that we will not run into the kind of situations that we saw in 2020. Then another proposal is that the EC must by law be made a mandatory party to all parliamentary election petitions, just as it is in the case in presidential election petitions. When it comes to parliamentary election petitions, the EC is not a mandatory party. And then the EC must be a compellable witness to produce all public election and election-related material and documents relevant to presidential and parliamentary level election disputes. Because, as we said, when we went to the Supreme Court did great injustice to the people of Ghana and to us by not allowing the EC chairperson to come and tell Ghanaians, tell us you declared results. When you did the results, you declared the first results, the total came up to 51%. Oh, sorry, 101%. How is that possible? So come and explain to us. It's a public duty, it's not a private business. How did you get that 101%? And when you did the correction, you still got it wrong. How did that happen? What was the base documents that you used to get those tabulations? Tell us, let's all know. The Supreme Court used civil procedure and technical rules not to allow it.
Honorable, let me just interject a little here. You are asking that the Electoral Commission be embodied in all these cases. I don't know if you consider something like this, because by the law, the presidential elections can be, you have 21 days after the polls have been declared, the results have been declared, to file. In the case of the parliamentary elections, it is only when the results are gazetted that you can now move ahead to make a challenge in the case. And sometimes by that time, a lot of things have gone under the drain, and they can deliberately, the government of the day, delay and drag the whole issue if it is against them. But if it is for them, they could also rush over it. Did you consider anything on that part?
Yes, we did. We said that in the same way that with the presidential elections, it was supposed to be within 42 working days or so, right?
Yeah.
In the same way with the parliamentary elections, there must be a certain time period. Because we've had precedents where I recall Ayawaso was sworn in 92, getting into 96, or no, 96, in 96 rather, getting to 2000, where there was a dispute and the matter was in court, and the court ruled in favor of the petitioner, but by that time 4 years had elapsed. It doesn't make sense. So we actually made those proposals that the presidential election must have a time limit the same way as the parliamentary election. So we made that proposal as well.
Oh, great.
So our other proposal is that the EC should be split into two separate bodies, namely an office for the regulation of political parties, which some people have given other names to, and an electoral commission by amending the Political Parties Act 2000-574. Now, we feel that based on experience, the work of managing an election is very, very serious. The EC has to manage district assembly elections, and it has to manage parliamentary and presidential elections. The district assembly elections,
unit committee elections, as
unit committee elections. Those are major tedious tasks that requires a lot of time, effort, energy, and all the surrounding controversies that follow. So what we have observed is that more often than not, the EC is involved in the election management more than monitoring, evaluation, and management of the political parties. And in a democracy, for your democracy to grow and thrive, your political parties must grow and strive and thrive. Throughout its tenure, the Electoral Commission, from the time of Afriyie, they are supposed to do periodic reviews of the status of the various political parties. They've only been able to do that twice since 1992. So you have a situation where the other side of the EC's job, which is monitoring the political parties and ensuring that they are performing up to speed, has been relegated to the background. We are bringing out this proposal also from a futuristic perspective, because we think that ultimately one of the ways by which we can curb corruption and excessive expenditure during electioneering campaigns is to have state funding of political parties, because we believe that one of the major reasons why we have so much corruption is that political parties, especially incumbent governments or all parties, spend too much money on elections. Too much. That money must come from somewhere. And when you spend that kind of money, you must also find a way of recouping and preparing for the next election. So it's a vicious cycle. Every 4 years, John, I would ask you to get some people to do some independent analysis of how much the political parties, especially incumbent parties, spend every election year. You collapse. If you look at that within the context of the fact that we live in a country where people don't have schools, don't have places of convenience, don't have water, our roads are in a horrible state, basic survival infrastructure we don't have. And every 4 years, we spend humongous amounts of money on elections. Is it not crazy? So should we continue doing the same thing and expect different results? So we are looking at it futuristically. Now, once the state begins to fund political parties, the state will now be in a position to regulate. Okay? So if you are supposed to, and I know in developed countries, they have it, especially the Scandinavian countries, this is a limit. You cannot go beyond this. You cannot do more than so much adverts. You cannot have more than this billboards. It brings some sanity. Now, that can only be done when there's a proper system or entity to do proper monitoring and evaluation. It cannot be, otherwise, if you just give money to political parties, they will spend it and come and tell you stories.
Come and tell stories.
So you need an independent entity that will be able to manage and regulate. And that entity also determines which parties will qualify. Because our rules are clear. For a political party to be viable, you must have offices in all the districts,
constituencies,
and have founding members. How many of our parties are in that category? Or if even we decide that, look, there may be willy-nilly smaller parties, fine, we can have smaller parties. But what will be their own threshold? All these things all must be set out clearly, so that you don't have a situation where you've had situations where people are going to file their nominations at the last minute. After they've gone around the whole country, they go and file their nomination. EC says, I don't accept your nomination because of some error. And indeed, last elections, we had a situation where a particular party had its forms rejected because there was an error. When the person now went to the Supreme Court acknowledged that indeed was not treated fairly. But if they want to reverse this procedure, the whole system to affect the elections, therefore the person must suffer injustice. It's not fair.
It's not
if
fair.
You had a separate entity that was looking at the political parties, that matter would have been seen and known way ahead of time.
Good.
So,
Honorable, before you get it, there is a question that has repeated from viewers. They are asking that should the Electoral Commission decide not to pay heed to these reforms that you are proposing, what is the plan B of the party?
First of all, I have seen that question.
Yeah.
You see, when you are engaged in something and your mindset from the beginning is that you are going to fail, then you might as well not do it.
Not start it at all.
Exactly. Because if the whole thing, this thing is not going to work, then we should all stop. Then this interview shouldn't even continue. I know that people will say, well, but it's the same Electoral Commission that in the past. That is why now we are not sitting at IPAC. In the past, we had the discussions with them in the room. Now we are engaging all the key stakeholders and civil society who are virtually endorsing our position. And our position is based on sound logic and arguments. When we meet people, we say, look at the recommendations. Don't look at NDC or MPP. What is being proposed?
Oh, another technical hitch. We hope Honorable will come back. There is a very salient question that I have to ask him in terms of the setup of the Electoral Commission for their collation of results for the 2020 election. We would want to find out from Honorable if the structure that the Electoral Commission put in place was actually discussed by all the stakeholders, or it is an afterthought. Oh, Honorable, welcome back. You could continue, but we're trying to find out, before you land, we're trying to find out the issue of the new setup of the collation centers by the Electoral Commission. Was this made known to all the political parties before the, because I don't know whether it's in the CI that was used for the elections. If not, was it known that we're going to have these regional collation centers and all that? That's against the previous arrangements where the results are sent from the constituency to the national.
Okay, so it is something, it is one of the issues that we had. When they brought it up, we said it's completely unnecessary. What is the basis for having regional collation centers for the presidential elections? Because in presidential elections, it is the EC chairperson at the headquarters who is the sole returning officer. So what happens is that when the results are collated at the constituency, they are then faxed directly to the EC head office. But then our agents in the strong room would also have hard copies. Then they will check before the EC will sign and release. By introducing this other layer of regional collation centers, you are complicating matters. Because if it's about communication between the constituency and national is faster than communication from constituency to region to national.
Yeah.
So what was the basis? We spoke and spoke and spoke and they refused. So it's one of the proposals that we've put forward, that the regional collation centers should be abolished because we don't see the basis. Indeed, we've had more problems with these regional collation centers than solutions. And indeed, if I have I had the EU reports. I didn't bring it.
Yeah.
The European Union Election Observer Mission report stated clearly in page 41 that there was no transparency in the processes of collating the results from the regional collation centers. Because why? It's very simple. From constituency, it goes to national, they check, and then they release it. Then we have evidence today, and anybody can check. If you go to the EC's website, if they still have the results there, do a tally of all the constituency results and do a tally of the regional results. You'll see that there's a discrepancy.
There's a discrepancy.
And the EU report clearly cited Greater Accra as an example. We can cite Eastern region and Ashanti region. Once you have that system, it even raises a constitutional issue. The law says that it is the EC who is the returning officer. So in what capacity are those regional collation officers operating? Are they co-returning officers? There's no basis. So it's one of the strong proposals that we have put forth, that we should abolish it. And as the Americans will say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. We've had elections all this while from constituency to the National Collation Center. We've never had a problem. It is only this time that the results had to go through the region that we had an electoral commission declaring results over 100%. So if you introduce something that has brought such shame and embarrassment to you and to the country and led to all manner of confusion, there is no point in us continuing.
I'm sure, Honorable, we're running out of time, but so far we've just looked at the very first set of proposals, which are more or less dependent on the legislature or the parliamentary implementation. What about the ones that are suggested for the Electoral Commission? Can we look at a few of them and then we see?
With the one of them which is very critical to us, I'll just mention a few that I'll focus on one. First of all, the temporary staff of the EC that are recruited. In this election, they recruited about 260,000 plus staff. The regulation says that the names of those people should be displayed at the various district offices so that we can know if they are active partisan people, either NDC or MPP, we can object to them. It wasn't done. It was more like on the whims and caprices of district officers. We want that to be clearly spelled out. One of the major issues we had was on the Form 8A, B, and C. That is the poll declaration of results form.
Okay.
And as I told you, first of all, the nature of the form, the way it is. I don't know if you've ever been a polling agent before. We did some training, and it's very complex. We think that the form should be redesigned and made very, very simple. Very simple. Anything which is too complicated that any average person cannot understand lends itself to all kinds of manipulation. So we are proposing that the form should be redesigned. And then each of the forms should also have particular serial numbers. And then BVD printouts of each polling center should be given to each political party or agent's candidates and should be posted at the polling station. Now, these are supposed to be done, but more often than not, it is like it's the discretion of the electoral officer. So there has to be clarity about that. Then this whole issue about closing of polls, starting polls at 7 and closing at 3 p.m. Again, we feel that this issue has not been well thought through. The EC gave their justification that it would enable them to finish with the processes before dark. But based on our experience and research, from the time the votes are counted at the various polling stations, declared, and then moved to the collation center, and they are tallied and declared, it takes a minimum between 5 to 7 hours, minimum.
Yeah.
So even if you close at 3, you would end up doing the collation around 8 and 9 at the earliest. We know that in some communities, it will take 12 hours, even a day and a half, depending on the distance. So this type of proposal comes out from people who only think that Ghana is like Accra or Kumasi, where you can just walk to your polling station. In some of our communities, people have to cross rivers before they go and vote. Some of our peasant farmers, they do subsistence farming. They have to go to the farm in the morning, get some food before they come and get ready to go and vote. And those are the people that we should be concerned about, because the primary duty of the Electoral Commission is to put in place systems and measures and mechanisms to facilitate easy access to polls, not to put impediments in the way of people. So we think that it is not good. It will disenfranchise people, it will cause confusion. And the argument about darkness is untenable, because after all, we'll have 275 collation centers. If the problem is lights, then put enough lights there. Make sure that the places are visible. You put in place systems and mechanism, proper security, so that we can have our collation. Again, we've been doing 7 to 5 p.m. We've never had any problems. Again, as Americans will say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Don't fix it.
7 to 5 has not created any problem. So why do you want to experiment and change to 7 to 3 with all the potential problems and challenges that we anticipate? So we think that it is not proper. And then the EC should also reduce the number of extra ballot papers supplied to polling stations for spoilage. In fact, we're just on the verge of releasing an official statement on something that happened during the 2020 elections. Ballot papers being printed by one of the printing houses, InnoLink, during the elections.
Yeah.
And it became a matter of controversy. Eventually, we had to destroy those ballot papers under the supervision of National Security Police, the EC, and the printing house. The EC recently came out to say that, because I had said it somewhere, and the EC came out to say that it is not true and that we should produce evidence. So we have evidence, video evidence, details at the press that covered the destruction, and all, we have everything. And so we are going to release that, and we'll get it to you so that you can circulate it abroad for people to see the kind of system that was going on during the 2020 elections. So, and apart from those 1 million for Ashanti, in about 10 different constituencies, we observed that they give them excess ballots, way beyond the 2 to 5% that was allowable as excess in case of destruction. So we're saying that the number of extra ballots per polling station should be reduced, because that then tends to create opportunity for people to put in illegal ballots. So then we now come to the post-elections recommendations. We're saying that the EC should establish by CI administrative dispute resolution mechanisms for first instance grievances against decisions and actions of election officials. In particular, an election adjudicating committee should be established at the head office of the EC to review disputed presidential results prior to the EC's publication of the final declaration of the presidential election results and the gazetting of same. So if we have an election adjudication committee, for example, in 2020, we had issues and we had written to the EC, we met a peace council. In fact, what many people do not know about the Rojo Metununu and Pesawai saga is that we had met with the peace council, and the peace council had agreed that they were going to convene a meeting between us and the EC to look at our complaints and issues. And subsequently, the EC would decide whether they were going to go ahead or not. And there's precedence in this matter.
Yeah.
If you recall, in 2008, the MPP raised issues about results. Dr. Farijan was on the verge of declaring the results. And the MPP raised issues. Dr. Farijan listened to them, and based on all the facts and evidence, he said, look, then we have to go to time. Because the votes were leading with about 4,000 votes. But the votes from time was about 40,000. And we went to time, and time became the decider. So there's been precedent. So at that time, Madame J. Mensah called Rojo Metununu and said that because the Peace Council is arranging a meeting between your party and us to look at your complaints, go and inform your flag bearer that I am putting the declaration of the results on hold. That's how come Rojo and Pesawai left with all goodwill and went. And then she quickly sneaked and went to declare results that turned out to be false. So we're saying there should be an electoral. And then when that happened, the first resort and the last resort is the court.
The court.
We're saying that no, there should be election adjudication committees. All these administrative issues will be looked at before the final declaration, so that the court will not become the first and last results. And then party agents must also be able to see the results before they are declared. Recall that Rojo was complaining that many of the results, he was not able to see them. They just came and then they were taking them to the EC chairperson's room. So, and then there's they must publish details polling station by polling station. Right now, the law, in fact, there's a Supreme Court ruling that said that the EC is not bound to publish the results polling station by polling station. So they only publish constituency. If they publish any polling station, it's just like out of their own volition. We think that they must be bound by law, because we are talking about transparency. It's the polling station results that determine the summary, that determines the constituency, etc. So publish from the polling station so that anybody sitting at home can take the results and do his own computation and determine whether at the end of the declaration you got 101% or not. So these are some of the post-election proposals that we have made. And then we're saying that there must be a public broadcast of the presidential vote collation process at the EC head office as and when the constituency presidential results are received. We recall that those days that we didn't even have, such a plural media. Those days at the Independence Square and at various regional centers, you see boards, when the results come, then they put it there. And it was clear for everybody, so you could track and follow. Now that we are in an age of information, what is wrong with the EC? When the results come, you put it out there. All the parties have seen it, they certify, you put it out there. So that, you see, there's even a psychological benefit. As the results are coming in, whichever way is going, at least psychologically, you'll be prepared. If it's not going well for you, you'll be prepared. If it's going well too, Not that you'll be there, look at the tension between the night of 7th to the afternoon of 9th. And then you'll be there. Then some results are announced with mistakes. You don't know the basis. But if it is done in this way, everybody is able to track. And the final results that come, everybody will be able to check that this is really a true reflection of what has happened so far. So these are, just because of time, so I can't go into every single one, but these are.
It's true. But Honorable, I think we need to have you again, especially those of us who are far away from the country. We are not privileged to a good explanation as to the proposals of the NDC, which has been submitted to the Electoral Commission. And I think it's a very good forum for people to get more education on it, so that at least at any point in time, we will throw our weight behind what is coming up for the entire good of the population. Before I let you go, let's find out one funny thing that somebody just sent in, that the NDC has very good proposals, but it's like they have an issue with communication. We aren't able to communicate our proposals or our plans to the general public. I do not know whether this is really true, Honorable.
Oh, I mean, there's always room for improvement.
Yeah.
One of the challenges we have had is that most of the outlets, which hitherto were platforms that we could disseminate our views, have been shut down by this wicked and callous MPP government. Radio Gold and the affiliates. So that is a challenge, but we're still pushing. The first part of our strategy is that we needed to get the buy-in of the key stakeholders. So if you have CDD, IDEG, and all these ASEPA and all these other CSOs, and you have the religious community, you have the Christian community, Muslim community, you have trade unions, and all those people supporting our proposals. That's about 90%. And you create a platform where it is subject to further discussion. You also have the diplomatic community supporting. Let the EC come and tell us that, though, we will not take any of your proposals at all. When that happens, and I'm responding to that question, when that happens, then we all know that the democracy is a sham. All right? But we are not going into this with that mindset, because that will be defeatist. Our mindset is that any reasonable, patriotic person who loves this country, who loves democracy, who is open-minded, and these reform proposals are not to serve the NDC's interest. They are to serve the electoral interest, fairness across board. In the same way that in 1993, when most of those proposals that came, change of ballot boxes from opaque to transparent, photo ID card, most of them, not all, most of them came from the NPP, and they were accepted. And they helped with the electoral process. So these proposals, would they help with our electoral architecture? Would they enhance the credibility of our elections? That should be the step. If we all, majority of us, agree that there is merit in these proposals, then the Electoral Commission should tell us that, well, there is merit in it and we won't take it. Then we cannot advise ourselves. But that is not our approach. We believe that if not all, majority of these proposals will be accepted.
Wonderful. We are very grateful to you, Honorable, but definitely we must have you again on this channel so that you throw more light on not only the electoral reforms, but preparation of the political party in going into 2024 election. We have a series of activities that are lined up, and I'm pretty sure that at the end of the day, we'll be able to get to the grassroots to convince them, not to convince them, because we have the evidence on the ground of what the NDC has done as compared to what the MPP is doing, because they are just up there with only slogans. So that we'll have the time to tell more of our story to the good people who are not privileged to have it and who are far away from all of us. We're very grateful this evening, and probably just in a minute, you could have your final words for our viewers, wherever they are.
What I'll say is that NDC has learned very bitter lessons from the 2020 elections. And as President Mahama said, 2024 is going to be a do or die affair. And so we are putting in place all the mechanisms and the systems to ensure that what happened in 2020 will not happen again. we need the support of everybody. We've all lamented, but after the book of Lamentations, I think there's another book in the Bible. We shouldn't remain at Lamentations. It's very dangerous. It can lead to depression. We've all been sad, we've all been broken, but I really want to appeal strongly to our members that we shouldn't remain in that mode. Because sometimes you meet people and they're like, they've given up, they are depressed, Yes, it was a very painful, because the victory was there, it was in our hands, but they took it from us. And so it's very painful, but we need to move forward. We need to move beyond that. And we...
let me interrupt you. I mean, this is the last time I will interrupt. I wanted to just end it, but somebody saying that I should find out is a very important question for the person. The issue of continuous registration of voters at the electoral district offices. Yes. What has been the stand now? Because it started and MPP came to office, it stopped. So what is the situation right now?
Like you said, it stopped. So we are proposing that it is something that we must do. It is something that we should continue, not every few years, then we go and spend millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. It just doesn't make sense. We must have continuous registration. However, when we started the consultations, some of the feedback we are getting is that alone will not be enough. So maybe every 10 years, maybe after a census, then we do a mass one to complement. So that is the feedback that we are getting. We propose that we should go along with the continuous registration once every Friday, the first Friday or last Friday of every month, with representatives of the political parties, so that we can ensure that nothing funny happens. And then whoever people are registered, we can check subsequently with the register so that people don't play games. But the feedback is that, yes, we do that continuously, but then once a while, every 7 years, every 10 years, we do a mass one. So that is also being looked at.
Okay, thank you.
Somebody's asking me when I'm coming to Germany, you should buy me a ticket.
I will send that message across. We are very grateful to you, Honorable Elvis Afriyie Ankara, for making time with us this evening. And once again, we will have to fall on you. We'll bring you back here to give more light on what the NDC is up to in the run up to 2024. And to our viewers up there,
we're ever ready for you anytime.
Great. And our viewers up there, we are very grateful for your time, and we ask you to join us again tomorrow on another wonderful program, Anokresem, and there you will get more information about what is happening in the country Ghana. To you, wherever you are, have a blessed evening and enjoy the rest of your day. Good night.
Ghana for to abamman na do biom se ombeye president. Excuse my language. Maybe MPP ni na make say. I always say this. Se mutu abama na edo. Esan be ye president bioma and the Ghana mwajimi. Excuse my language. I am MPP. I'm not talking for NDC here. I'm speaking as a social commentator and as an imam from MPP communication. And I mean Kasai. You see, I've been an MPP Nasara chairman for 9 years in the most biggest Zongo community, which is Nima Mamobi. And I know what I'm saying. Someone to me can't make a tiremo. I dream Papa Biani Nanado Tiremo. I'm telling you, I dream Papa Biani the Tiremo or train Namu Manu another 4 years. So almost say 4 more for Nana to do more wahala. You will see that kind of person we are talking about.